Work-life balance isn't the problem. It's the solution that became the problem. You know that version of yourself that shows up to dinner, but you're still mentally in the last meeting of the day? Not even a good meeting, just a meeting. And someone at the table asks you something and you say, "Sorry, what?" And you've been saying "sorry, what?" for about 3 years now? You've read the books on boundaries. You made the rules. Work stops at 6. Weekends are sacred. And then you spend Sunday evening with that low hum of dread just sitting in your chest because you're trying so hard not to think about Monday that thinking about Monday is basically all you're doing.
Here's what I want to get to. There's a specific word for what that protection costs you, a psychological term. And when I first understood it applied to this, not just to task switching, it reframed everything I thought I knew about my own exhaustion. I'll get to it in a moment. But first, you need to understand what you've actually been sold. The balanced scale. Half work, half life. And in the middle, somewhere, peace. It's a beautiful image. It describes something that has never existed. Sophie Leroy at the University of Washington spent years studying what happens to your brain when you switch between tasks. She called it attention residue. When you move from one thing to another, a meeting to a meal, a deadline to your kid's homework, part of your brain doesn't actually make the switch. It stays behind, still chewing, still processing. So you're at the school play, and part of you is drafting the email you didn't send before you left. You're finishing the quarterly report, and part of you is still guilty about the school play. Neither version of you is actually present anywhere. That's not balance. That's two half performances, running simultaneously, draining the whole system at once. And here's the thing about what I just described. That's the attention residue. That is the psychological cost Leroy was measuring. But the part that embarrassed me when I first understood it fully, the wall you're building to prevent that, the enforcement of the boundary, the deliberate not checking, the active suppression, that produces its own residue. You're not protecting your energy. You're spending it on the fence. Actually, wait. I want to back up for a second because I skipped something. The work-life balance idea was built for a factory. Punch in at 9, punch out at 5. The work was in a building you could physically leave. You walked out the door and the door closed and that was it. But if your work lives in your phone, your laptop, your email, your nervous system, there's no building to leave. The wall you're trying to build is imaginary. And maintaining an imaginary wall takes real energy. That's the part most people never say out loud. I know it's not what people want to hear, because boundaries has become almost a moral category now, not just a practical one. Setting them makes you wise and healthy. Struggling with them makes you broken. But I spent a long time using that framework to avoid asking the more uncomfortable question, which is, what if the wall itself is the wrong shape? Here's what I found when I stopped trying to separate work from life and started designing a rhythm instead. Not a schedule, a rhythm. There's a difference, and it matters. A schedule says, work from 9 to 6, off from 6 to 9. A rhythm says, I know I'm sharp in the mornings. Actually sharp, not performing sharpness. And that window is worth protecting. Not because the clock says to, because my brain is genuinely different at 8 a.m. than it is at 3 p.m. And fighting that difference costs more than working with it ever did. Now, the piece I almost didn't include, the one that sounds soft until you understand why it isn't. Rest is not the absence of work. It's where the work gets finished. There's something called the default mode network, the brain's background processing system. It's most active when you're not actively focused on anything. The walk with no podcast, the dinner where the phone is genuinely away, the drive where you let your mind do whatever it wants. Neuroscientists now understand this is where insight lives, where the thing you've been stuck on for a week surfaces quietly at 7 a.m. You don't generate that by pushing harder. You generate it by getting out of your own way, which means strategic rest isn't a reward for finished work. It's part of the production chain. The hours you spend off aren't charity to yourself. They're the fuel for the next intensive period. And if you skip them consistently, not occasionally, consistently, we're not disciplined. You're just slowly dismantling the machine you're trying to run. When was the last time you actually finished something? Not close, not 80%, actually finished. Sit with that.
Because the honest answer is usually more uncomfortable than people expect. You've probably already thought of the reason this doesn't apply to your situation. The job that doesn't flex, the obligations, the people counting on you to be available. I thought the same thing for a long time. But here's what I actually found. Most of the people in your life, the real ones, they don't want the performance of your availability. They want the part of you that's actually there.
And the version of you that shows up after 2 hours of genuine, focused work is a fundamentally different person than the one who crawled through 8 hours of fractured half attention. Telling someone, I'm offline until 3, I'll respond then, is not a boundary. It's a system. Systems are easier to respect than invisible emotional walls no one else can see. The guilt doesn't leave immediately. I want to be honest about that. The first weeks of building this way, I still felt like I was cheating, like not being visibly exhausted meant I wasn't serious. That guilt is the industrial model talking. It's the ghost of a punch card you never had.
And here's the uncomfortable part. The exhaustion you've been calling hard work might actually just be the tax of operating a broken system, not evidence of your commitment, just friction. Longevity is the actual goal, not this quarter, not this year. The ability to still be doing meaningful, good work 10 years from now and still actually want to. That doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from building something that doesn't require constant sacrifice just to keep running.
The question I keep sitting with isn't whether any of this is possible. It's why, knowing what you know about how you actually work, the real peaks, the real walls, the thing that happens to your thinking after the second bad night of sleep, you're still designing your days around a model invented for someone standing at an assembly line in 1955. That person punched out. You never do. So the balance you're chasing was never yours to find.